Okay, and we're live. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Hi, Jeff. How you going?
Excellent. Danielle, how are you doing?
Good. My name is Danielle Stein-Fairhurst. Before I introduce myself, I'm going to do our Welcome to Country, which is to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm on and which we are meeting virtually today. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. And what Aboriginal land are you on, Jeff?
It is the land of the Whadjuk Noongar people here in Perth in Western Australia.
Wow.
Yes.
All the way on the other side of Australia.
Exactly.
Fantastic. So my name is Danielle Stein-Fairhurst. I'm a financial modelling specialist based in Sydney, and it's my job to bring you different speakers that are relevant to the world of Excel and financial modelling. And today we have got a very popular session. We've got I think we had something like 460 people sign up for this one. So really, you are a really popular guy, Jeff, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So Jeff Robson,
just the subject, really, not me at all. So
no, I'm sure it's you. Yeah. So all the way from Perth. Jeff's a financial modelling specialist. He runs Access Analytics. He's a financial modelling trainer and consultant. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing, Jeff.
Sure. So just reading all the different people saying hi from all these different countries. So Hong Kong and Vienna and Holland and anyway, welcome from all over the world, Scotland and so on, the UK.
Yeah.
So yes, so run a consultancy here in Perth in Western Australia, Access Analytic, and we just had our 21st birthday party last year, actually. I know, I can't believe it's been that long. Yeah. But so consulting and training, doing lots of financial modeling, but also, Power BI consulting and training in those areas. Now getting into some overseas training once again. Nice to be back doing that again.
You do a lot of stuff like I do, don't you?
Exactly.
In the Middle East.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Have you been overseas? You've started traveling again, haven't you?
Not for training yet, but I have some coming up very soon. Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
So it won't be too long. Yeah.
Don't be modest, says Norman. Today we're talking about dynamic arrays, which are absolutely fantastic. And we're also talking about financial models, in specifically three-way financial models, which are also fantastic. But putting the two of those together can be quite a challenge. So I'm really interested in seeing what you have in store for us, Jeff.
Cool. Yes. Well, lots of interesting things, but I think they're very interesting. So judging by the interest, I think a number of other people do as well. So, But, I think, the traditional way of doing financial models is, as everyone I'm sure is aware, you write a formula and then you copy that formula. And if you want to extend it by another 12 periods, well, then you go back in and you insert some columns and you copy all your formulas across a bit further, and hopefully they all work and pick up the right numbers, and don't have to check too much. But what we're going to go through today is an example of a model where you just simply change the number of periods and the formulas automatically copy themselves. So these are the Excel's dynamic array formulas. I don't know whether people have used those a little bit or played with them perhaps yet. I'm not sure, but
or if you suddenly see the spill error appear
exactly.
In the model,
and you're like, what the heck is that? Yes, so there's sometimes annoying spill errors, yes. But yeah, it really, I think, we first looked at this a couple of years ago, I think, somewhere around there.
Yes, we did. We talked about, a similar topic where we were looking at dynamic arrays and how to apply those. And you've taken it a little bit further now, which is great.
So it was quite a simple model then. We've kind of extended that. It's still a simple model. We're not going to go through a really highly complex model, but it's a simplified model. But
a short time.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll look at how it's sort of all put together and talk through some of the formulas and just explain a little bit more about dynamic arrays and what they are and how they work. And for anyone who's not familiar, these are quite different to the old style of array formulas that we may have been used to, with the ones with the curly brackets and you had to do Control-Shift-Enter. So these are not those kind of array formulas. These are Excel's dynamic array formulas. So you need to have a reasonably recent version of Excel, or an an up-to-date version. If you're using a really old one, you should upgrade. It's really the advice there. I think most people will have that. We'll show you how you can kind of check that and look at that very shortly. So are the old style array formulas redundant? They're not redundant. You can still use them if you wish to, but kind of like, I think they're certainly a lot less useful and a lot less relevant.
Like with most things with Excel, they still work. It's just there's a better way to do it now.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't say I've used the old style array formulas in a very long time, actually, because the new style is just so much easier and better. And yeah, I'm not sure if there's still a use case. I'm sure there is somewhere for using the old style
Only
array formulas.
if people don't have access to it, really. That's the only reason I would use it.
Yeah. But then the functionality is also completely different as well. So in terms of what you can do and what these formulas do for you, and you can now insert rows and columns in the middle of your dynamic array formulas, and it allows you to do that. It doesn't break everything and so on. So yeah, I think there's a number of sort of benefits. Yeah, CSE formulas, that's the way.
Control Shift Enter, says Peter. Yeah.
Yes, we still love them so much, didn't we?
Not.
No.
Okay.
They had some uses, but yeah, in general not. Cool. So well, I think let's get into the model, shall we?
Yeah, you're going to share your screen and show us
I will.
This model.
Yes, thanks for reminding me.
And I do believe that Jeff is going to make this model available for everybody afterwards. So.
Indeed, yes, as well. All right, so talking today about how we can make a financial model without copying and pasting formulas. This is assuming you've written the formula in the first place, of course. It's not quite that clever that it just does all your formulas for you without you even, writing them in the first place. But let me move this Zoom thing out of the way. All right, so I'll just basically talk a little bit about what I've got. Also, before we get into that, we'll just talk a little bit about dynamic array formulas in general and kind of some of the things you can do with them. And then we'll sort of get into the actual model itself. So I've got a very simple model here, as I mentioned. It has a simple, setup page here with a few input parameters. And the key one on here is really this one here, which we'll come back to a little bit later on. How many periods do we want in our model? And we'll show that just by changing this one number, our entire model extends or shrinks, as the case may be. So I'll come back to that in a moment, but let me just go down and just to kind of illustrate some of the things we can do with these dynamic arrays. I'll just use perhaps this little staff table here. And let's say if you want to just check whether you have dynamic array formulas in your version of Excel, if you're using Office 365, if you're on a pretty much any of the channels now, I think they all have them now, but you can easily check just by typing in one of the dynamic array formulas. So there's about 7 different dynamic array formulas that they started with, and they've now sort of added quite a few extra ones. One of the ones you can look at is filter. What this allows you to do is to basically create a filter of a filtered list. And I could say filter this where, for example, my annual salary here is greater than 100,000, for example. And there's a list of just the people who have an annual salary of which is greater than 100,000. So you can see that my one formula here is spilling down, and it's actually I've written the formula in this cell here. So there's my formula, very relatively simple formula. And if I go down to the next row down here, you can see it's not in black, it's now been grayed out. So this tells me that my formula is in the top cell, and there's actually nothing in these cells here, believe it or not. So I could come in here, and if I entered another value in there, this is where we get those spill errors that we were talking about before, because my formula is trying to take up all of these cells, and it's being prevented from doing that because I've got a value in one of the cells it's trying to take up. If I delete that, all of my values come back again. So that's just a very simple example here. And if I do, say, another example would be unique. And if I point this at my little table here, I can say, give me a list of all the unique values out of there. And I can see that I've got, in this case, 2 COOs. And if I give me a list of the CEO is there, the CFO is there, but the COO only appears once instead of twice. So you can sort of use this to create some really cool and very useful things in Excel. So if you just want, as a very simple example, a list of the unique values in a column, that's what we've just done. But maybe you want to use this as the source for a validation list, so your data validation, for example. So I could say, if I go to my data validation, say add some data validation, and I want to base this on a list, and the source of my list is this cell here, spilled. So if I put the little hashtag, which is extremely hard to read, I'm sure, on your screen, let me just zoom that in. Give me one moment. I really should have set this up before. So you can see I've got a little hashtag or a little hash on the end of it. So by putting the hash on the end of it, I mean that cell and the formula that is in that cell spilled. So in this case, it'll be, was it like 7 rows or something like that? I think it was. But the source of this is now, back out. I've just put it on that cell, which wasn't very smart at all, was it? So I've just added the data validation to that cell. I should have added it to a different cell, but you get the idea. So the source of the validation comes from this list here, which is behind it. So you can use that. I guess that's another use case for these data validation and these dynamic array formulas. There's another really useful one, which I'm going to talk about, is sequence. So sequence allows us to produce a series of values which can potentially increment or decrement, as the case may be, in a certain number of rows and columns. So you see that my inputs here, I say how many rows. If I want 1 row, 10 columns, and I want it to start at 1 and increment by 1. I could leave those last 2 arguments out if they're and they'll default to 1, but just for the sake of clarity, I'll just put those in there. So I can create a sequence of numbers, and there's a number of.
I'm just going to stop your
1 to 10.
I'm just going to stop your screen from sharing, just because
sure.
It's showing, it's blocking some of the view. So if you could just stop.
All right, sure.
Stop share and just try resharing it again.
Reshare.
Some of the Zoom.
Did it stuff up when I
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yep. Great.
All right.
No. Can you just share your Excel only?
Yep, sure.
Yeah. Funny how it just suddenly does that sometimes.
That is
just blocking some of the tools are blocking some of the formulas, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah,
is that better?
Yeah, great.
Right. All right. Apologies for that. Thanks for letting me know.
Love the sequence. Really, really useful formula.
Yeah, definitely. So, again, very simple formula here, just to create a sequence, and I've hard-coded all my numbers in, but obviously these could be inputs from cells and so on, and you can create sequences of, all sorts of interesting things. I could also combine these functions together. So I could say filter the unique list of values, or give me a unique list of the filtered values, and I could do all these kinds of things. So you can start to sort of combine, like any other function, combine these things together. All right. So, you can even just do simple things like, I just want to replicate this entire table. So I could just say equals, and then just basically come over here and select all the data in that table, or the data in the headers if I really want the headers as well. Press enter, and that entire table is now being replicated. Good illustration here. You'll notice something that it's not doing with my 2 date columns. It doesn't replicate the formatting. So this is one kind of bit of a bugbear with these formulas, is they will copy the data, but they won't copy the formatting across as well. So something to be aware of. All right. Is there any questions so far that I need? Danielle, have you been looking at their questions?
Yeah, just a couple. What do you think about, will the unique filter replace the VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, or VLOOKUP? I think it's way more intuitive and more powerful. I can't see it though, because it kind of does quite a different thing to what the VLOOKUP. or
Yep,
Excel does.
I would agree. Yep, definitely, I agree. Yep.
Yeah. And
So,
can the filter return more than one column? Yes, absolutely. And
yep, there we go.
Thing about
Oh,
the
filter,
validation
yes.
list, yeah, does that get affected? So when you have the drop down using it, and if it gets corrupted with the spill error, that would affect your drop down, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. And
Yep.
can you make a table from an array output? Oh,
Can you make a table from an array? You mean like this or something else?
yeah, from the output. So like when you're using a dynamic array and then you try to use a table on it, it's not very happy, is it?
I'm not sure. What do you mean?
Well, like if you tried to turn that now into a table.
Sorry. Okay, an Excel like a control T
table.
table.
Like a table. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it won't like that. No.
I wish.
Yeah, no, you can't create a table from a dynamic array formula. Unfortunately, no. The output of a dynamic array. Sorry, misunderstood what you're saying.
Yeah. Gert Young says you can put headers on the top and it behaves similarly. Yes, I guess.
Yeah, somewhat similar, but yes, still not an actual table.
Comments are coming thick and fast. So Steve says, can arrays be deemed traceable and transparent as opposed to non-array formulas? Can you trace a source easily? It's slightly different, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's different because you're tracing the source of the cell that generates the array, not chasing the source of an individual cell in the array. And I think that's where the difference is, because some people, like in their minds, it makes it more traceable. Some people in their minds, it makes it less traceable, because some people go, well, where does that number 7 come from? How do I trace that back? And you've got to go back, well, what's the formula that's generating that array? And then, okay, am I happy with that formula? If I'm happy with that formula, then by default, I have to be happy with, everything that the array is generating, kind of thing. So
we've actually got a session coming up in a few weeks' time with Mike Thomas, and we're going to go into some of the new features like this in more detail. So we might move on from some of the technical,
the audit questions.
Yeah.
Sure.
And save that for them.
Yeah, that's fine. All good. All right. Well, so I'll get rid of these ones here. I don't really need them anymore. But in terms of the model itself, as I said, I've got some inputs at the top. I've got a few sort of input tables, and I've used Excel's data types here. Not sure if anyone's played with those as well. That'd be another new feature to have a look at if you haven't. So data and then stocks is what I've done, is I've entered these currency conversions, marked them as the data type of stocks, and that allows me to generate effectively a price in a reasonably live kind of format, pulling that from the internet. So again, won't go through that. Hope you haven't looked at that. Really useful. Have a look at that as well. What I've then got down here is just a table of some products. These are the things I'm planning on selling. And then down here, table of staff, as we were just looking at, and to give me some inputs for my balance sheet. I've got my capital expenditures here, and very creatively named with purchase 1 through 9, and a few kind of random numbers in here. Underneath that, there's my opening balance for my balance sheet. So just all of my different opening balances. And thank goodness my balance sheet balances at the start. So if it doesn't balance at the start, it certainly won't balance at the end. So what I've done is taken all of that information and then turned that into a financial model. And as I said, I will make this available after the session today, so you don't need to frantically take down notes. But what we'll do is perhaps just talk through some of the formulas in here and how they work. I'm not going to go through again all the different formulas, but I just wanted to kind of show how it's hanging together. So the first thing, which is probably one of the most important things potentially in any model, not just one that's generated with dynamic arrays, is to have a period number. So off the period number hangs the entire model in this case. So you can see it's using the sequence here. I've generated a sequence that starts at 1, goes to one row, starts, what am I trying to say? Has 1 row, has this many columns, starts at 0 and increments by 1. That's what I'm trying to say, isn't it? Okay. So that generates at the moment a range of values from 0 up to period 60. All right. So I thought I was about to sneeze then, but not. Underneath that, I've got a series of dates. So I've generated my series of dates using the date function. And you're kind of looking at this going, that's a bit of a weird date function. Why are you doing that? And what's the 0 on the end here? Well, I've kind of used this because my EO month function doesn't spill unless you do some other kind of unusual things to it. So what I've done here is I'm picking up the year of my start date, the month of my start date, and then adding on G6 spilled. So notice that, as we were saying before, there are only formulas in column G in this model. So all of the values to the right are being generated by spilling these formulas out to the right. So when I write this formula, I don't need to even put a $ in front of my G to lock the column. Because it's a dynamic array function, it's just spilling this formula all the way across, and I don't even need to put a $. Now, what I've done here is I've used the 0 at the end here. So if you think about day 1 is the first of the month. So if I put a 1 there, it would always give me the first of the month. The day before the first of the month is always the last day of the previous month. So this is kind of a bit of a roundabout way of generating a sequence of dates, which are always the last date in the month. So a little bit of a weird way of doing it. Underneath that, then I generate the years off that. So again, G7 and then spilled across. The month is working the same way, just a month function. I've got a little formula in here to calculate what's my financial year. So here in Australia, we've got a 30 June year end. So again, I'm just looking at whether the date is, whether the month, is greater than 6. And if it is, then take the year plus 1, otherwise just give me the year. So this kind of gives me, well, this is the 2022, then obviously all these are going to be in 23 and so on. I calculate the financial month and a few other bits and pieces. The model year, I just use this for a couple of my other inputs and for escalating some of my factors on a yearly basis. So again, because it is a fairly simple model, you'll see some of my formulas in here are quite sort of simplified in terms of my assumptions. And down here, this is just a sequence of ones. So the whole way across, it's just a series of ones. And what does that do? Well, this allows me, if a formula needs to spill across, so I just want to spill a value, I can just multiply by that sequence of ones, and my value will just then spill across without incrementing up or down. Okay, so like I said, I won't go through every single formula that I have in here, but I just want to kind of give a flavor for what we've done in here and how these formulas are working, and then we'll get down to some of the more interesting ones in a moment. You can see in here, sort is another dynamic array function, which I didn't mention earlier, but this just allows me to sort this list of rates in alphabetic order. And again, there's various kind of sort options that you can put in there as well. And I'm just sorting a column in the table. So if I was to go back to my FX rates table and insert another row into that table, it would just automatically get sorted into the correct spot in here, and it would then spill down one extra row. I've then used Wynn's favorite formula here, my colleague, XLOOKUP, and this one then takes the value from C18, and because this is spilling down, my XLOOKUP now also spills down. So there's a list of all of my FX rates and what the current values are, and then I've effectively just got a monthly change, which does exactly the same thing, just pulls the value from a different column.
Nice one, like it.
So, and then basically I just use that over here to now create a formula which spills not only down, but also across. So how does it know in which direction it needs to spill? Well, because it's referring to this cell which spills down, this cell which spills down, and this cell up here which spills across, my formula now is a sort of two-dimensional formula which spills both across and down. And again, you'll notice no $ required. So one formula does the entire block of cells there.
Amazing.
Amazing. Wow. Exactly. So no more, copying formulas across, no more copying formulas down. They just, just automatically copies itself down and across. So it is quite cool.
And does the financial model build itself as well?
Unfortunately, no. I wish. It's like I said, it's not quite that smart. It doesn't enter the formulas for me, but it's doing a lot more for us than it used to. Let's put it that way. So this formula down here, again, just basically doing the same kind of thing, just pulling in some data from the relevant tables, calculating my volumes, and I've got a volume change, and I'm just basically then using my, this is my annual volume change. So what I've done is a little bit of a, this calculate this percentage here, 1 plus this percentage to the power of my year number minus 1. And then I'm just kind of rounding it up a little bit so I get whole numbers and so on in there. So see, we have the same value out here for the first 12 columns, and then it starts incrementing by 3%, and then another 3% after that, and so on. All right, so that's kind of just to kind of simulate numbers changing on an annual basis and those kinds of things. Nothing particularly complex, I don't think. I don't know, you might have a different view. You might look at that and go, wow. So these ones are all kind of working in much the same kinds of way. So then I kind of come down here and I get into my actual income statement. So that's sort of some of my pre-workings, I guess. So down here, another formula which spills both across and down, looking at my 2 values at the top here. So again, just picking up the relevant values, multiplying those together or dividing one by the other. One thing I will mention is this one here. So when you want to add things up, it's not as simple as it should be, I must say. If you want to write a formula that you just want to go, you know what, I just want to write a formula here that just sums these values. And you're like, why can't I just put that value summed? Okay, and that's value spilled. So if I enter that value spilled, guess what I get? It's giving me the entire array of data. So it's all of the values in that entire big giant table. So there's my 68 million, which is entirely not what I want. I want to sum row by column by column. So there's a bit of an annoyance, I must say, that you have to kind of do it this way. Essentially, what we want to do is we want to process this range of cells that's been generated with the dynamic array, and we want to process that column by column. And this function here, by col, is basically the function that allows me to process this array of cells column by column, and then I have to stick a lambda on the end.
New formula? I've not used that one before.
It is pretty new, yeah. So you won't see this one much yet. So again, you might need to check if you don't have if this is coming up with a hash name error in your version of Excel. That means you don't have the by col function. So you can see there's by col and by row. So if you want to have, some totals, you do?
Yeah. Just it's not often I see a new function.
Yeah, there you go. By col. Yeah. By col is a great function, even if your name's not col. And yeah, basically it's a little bit of a weird way. And obviously you could wrap this in a proper lambda function. If you haven't used lambda functions yet, take a look at those as well. I'm guessing someone's done a podcast about that, or is about to, if they haven't already, I'm sure, in Danielle's series here. But basically, someone should definitely do that, Danielle. That would be very useful. So yeah, I think just allowing you to write more complex functions and make them simple for the users to input is really my overall summary of a lambda function. So here, I could wrap this whole thing in a lambda function and just say, sum my column, and just allow you to pick the value in the cell at the top there. But here we've got to write the whole thing out. So effectively, this just basically sums up everything in here column by column is the short version of that. And obviously this one then spills across as well. So my goal in putting this whole thing together was that I'd write no formulas anywhere apart from this column. And so that's what I ended up doing with this model. So it took a little bit, I must say, it did take a lot more work and a lot more effort and a bit more thinking to put it together. But once it's put together, like extending it is just, so simple. So
yeah, Patrick suggested that you could have the sum totals as the only non-dynamic array parts of the model if you wanted to avoid the lambda for a bit, which is perhaps not such a bad idea. But
You can certainly do that as well. So yeah, you
Yeah,
could
it's
just,
a good option.
you could just write a normal sum function.
Mm.
But where's the fun in that?
Exactly.
So I can write a normal sum function, and if I copy that across, obviously it totals, but it doesn't automatically copy itself across. And that's what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
So yes, quite right. You can certainly mix these up with normal standard Excel functions. There's nothing stopping you from doing that.
It's just having that automatic expanding functionality that you lose. Yeah. Peter suggests that every formula could be a lambda. Not sure about that.
Well, I think lambdas, I would use lambdas where they're useful and necessary, but
yeah,
you might argue that perhaps there's situations in here where my formulas I think are relatively simple, but someone else might look at them and maybe disagree. So
yeah, maybe Peter, if you'd like to run a session on lambda for us, that would be great. Or anyone else.
Hint.
Yeah. Big hint. Not such a hint.
No.
All right.
So so my total cost of goods sold down here works the same way. Again, another by coal, doing exactly the same thing. And then my gross profit is simply my sales minus my COGS, and then obviously both of those two being spilled across. So again, no dollar signs. When I come down here, what I was trying to do here was basically just replicate my little table of staff. And so the first part is very simple, just equal different columns in my table to pull the data through. So nothing particularly interesting there. But what I did over here was I wanted to have a situation where I could have people starting and stopping in the relevant years, and my formulas over here would automatically start and stop them in the right years. So again, fairly sort of, common scenario for staffing that, people are not always there for the entire period of the model. You want to model new people coming on, or people, being fired or retiring or whatever. So that's kind of what I was doing here. And unfortunately, again, another bit of an annoyance, I would say, is that the AND function doesn't spill by default. So this is me simulating what an AND function would do. So if you do a test here, this results in a series of trues and falses. And if I multiply that test by another series of trues and falses, if they are both true, I've effectively created an AND function.
Wow. Okay.
So this cell must be greater than my start date, and so my date up the top must be greater than my start date, and must also be less than or equal to my end date.
So there's a few functions that don't spill, like the
AND.
Yeah, I didn't realize.
It's kind of a little bit hit and miss, or a bit trial and error, perhaps, to find out which ones spill and which ones don't. So again, a little bit kind of frustrating that not all spill. Maybe I'll just say yet. Microsoft, please make some more functions spill. And I'm sure there's a logic to it somewhere that says why certain functions spill and certain ones don't. Someone did explain it to me one point, but it was quite complex and I can't remember what the explanation was now. But anyway, so some things spill and some don't.
Yeah, we've got a couple of questions, Jeff, if that's all right. Just about with the automatic expansion, Excel will add rows automatically down, which is great. And then Henry says, if you've got more products, for example, like what happens if you go down further? I mean, if you run out of rows, if you run out of space, it'll just spill, won't it? Or have you got any
Yeah, exactly.
How to get around that problem?
Leave some more gaps, I suppose.
Okay. I was hoping you had some magic trick with that.
And if I did, I'd be more of a guru. But no, I don't have any magic tricks, unfortunately, for that. So I mean, I'll come back. Let's actually look at the example now. What happens if we do add a new product? So we can see this list is in there many times. So there's the list of products here, list of products, we can see it in there quite a few times. So if we come back to our products table and we add in, probably like, the best book in the world, Financial Modeling for Dummies. Everybody needs a copy of that book, obviously.
Yes, they do.
Monthly sales volume, like 10
Here it is.
million.
I definitely need that.
Absolutely. How much is that bargain basement price, Danielle?
I don't know. Amazon's got it. Cheaper
What is
than
Amazon?
yeah.
Amazon's a rip-off, but what do they charge? They add their 30% on. I don't know. What does it sell for? I don't even know.
I don't know. It's about $50, I think.
Okay, $50. Just an absolute bargain. I'll just say that right now. That's in AUD. All right, we don't want it to bring up the price for it or to see whatever that is. We're on AUD. Are you increasing your prices anytime soon, Danielle?
I don't know. Ask Amazon.
All right, let's.
I don't
Amazon
sell them.
probably
It's a publisher.
All right. All right, get in quick because Amazon's about to increase the price.
Or Wiley, the publisher. Actually, it's Wiley sells them.
The volume. Sorry, that was our volume increase. Anyway, all right, let's put like 20% because everyone's going to go buy it now, obviously.
Yeah.
And their price increase. Make sure you get it now because they're probably going to increase the price. And who knows what the margin is? We'll just put in a number. All right, so there we go. We've inserted a new product into our model that didn't exist before. Come back here and we can now see financial modeling for dummies has been inserted. All of the calculations for that are all done simply by me just adding a new value into that table. So there is now you'll notice up here, obviously that was what I was saying before, the formatting doesn't copy. So a little bit annoying with that. Again, this is one of the things I hope Microsoft will fix quite soon. And if I added another product, this table here would result in a spill error. Actually, no, it wouldn't because there's nothing in that cell. I take that back. But if it was in that column, it would result in a spill error. Yeah. All right, so you can see it's been added in, and all of these now have my new wonderful, amazing product being added in there. So that's I guess a really powerful example of adding stuff simply add stuff to a table and providing enough rows, everything in the entire model has just been updated to incorporate that. So quite amazing. The first time I looked at this, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I alternated between that and, oh my God, this is so frustrating. Why doesn't this do what I think it's going to do? So, but anyway, as I said, a bit more effort, but I do like it. So formulas down here, again, quite straightforward. So these are just, adding things and spilling across. So nothing particularly exciting there. This is picking up depreciation from my balance sheet working. So we'll have a look at that shortly. Got some interest calcs in there, again, from my calculations below. So nothing too much more on the income statement. What I've done with my balance sheet here is I've got obviously a very simple balance sheet, but this is picking up all the values from my balance sheet workings, which I've just sort of put down below my existing balance sheet. So all these are just simply linking to cells where I do all the workings for that. So, and then I've got a little check down the bottom here, as we all should. Does my balance sheet balance? And just basically check the sum of the squares is one method that I've used for checking that these are all zeros. So in case there's a plus and a minus that equal out, I did a sum of the squares to check on that. All right, so there's my, and same with my, cash flow statement, again, just primarily just linking to things. Okay, that one's doing a little bit, some other stuff, but most of these are just effectively just linking to cells. So what I'll do is I'll come down the bottom here and just talk about how I've kind of set up these balance sheet workings, because a lot of them are almost kind of working in much the same kind of way. So I've set up two different methods here, so you can kind of compare and contrast. Method number one is what we'd probably be most used to seeing when we're looking at our existing financial models. So here we have a simulated corkscrew. So the typical corkscrew calculation takes an opening balance, adds some pluses and minuses, and creates a closing balance by adding the values above. So, and then this closing balance here becomes the opening balance in the next period, and we repeat the process and so on. So it sort of goes down and then up and across and down. And so it's a little bit like a corkscrew, hence the name. In our case, we can't do corkscrews because with dynamic arrays, there's actually no way of just saying, oh, I just want a function that just refers to that cell. So if you want to kind of just go back one period, that's really much more, much difficult anyway. So it's really not possible to just go back one cell, which is kind of annoying, I must say, sometimes, because we're so used to doing it in Excel, right? Oh, I just want to, this cell here, I just want to make that, this cell here needs to be equal to the previous closing balance. So in Excel, normal Excel formulas, it's like the simplest formula in the world. In here, in the world of dynamic arrays, this is not so simple. So what did I do? Well, effectively what I did was I've got it first up, there's a little simple X lookup, just using a little code I've got on the side here to go back to my setup page and pull in my opening balance based on the debtors word here. So this is my, says closing balance, but this is my opening balance column here, which I probably should label at some point. But anyway, I then replicate that and pull that across into all of my formulas in this column here, which is actually my opening balances. So what have I done in order to pull in and create and simulate a series of opening balances? Well, I used the let function in this case. So hopefully people have started using let function. And if you haven't used let function, I encourage you to use let function as well. Really powerful function. I don't know, Danielle, what do you think about let function?
Yeah, I actually use it a lot because you get around having to repeat yourself. Often you're having to repeat stuff within a formula. And once you start using it, I find it's actually really, really useful.
Yeah, no, it's great that you don't have to repeat yourself. Let me just say that again. It's great you don't have to repeat yourself. Oh, sorry. So Dave, the dad joke's so good, he better by the end of the session, I should mention as well. It's the end of the day here. It's even later for people in other parts of the world, I know. Anyway, okay. So what this basically does is creates kind of like internal range names if you haven't seen let function before. So I'm saying, make my opening balance equal to this cell, the period number is, this cell spilled and so on. And then lastly, I do a calculation to calculate a result, which is my opening balance plus, and then what I'm doing here is basically essentially simulating my corkscrew. So I'm adding up all of the additions row, which is my sort of purple row here, up to the period number -1. So what that does, if I'm over, let's say I'm in this cell here, it's taking my opening balance and adding up all of these and then subtracting all of those. And that's how I'm getting, so if I take my opening balance here and then add up that block of cells, I get the 6027300, which is where that opening balance is coming from. So it's kind of a bit of a roundabout way.
Yeah, that old rule, the rule of thumb. I don't think this is passing the test. Yeah.
You like it shorter than your thumb? Is that the rule of thumb that you're talking about?
It's not shorter than my thumb at all.
Well, the let function lets you kind of go beyond that, I find. I don't know whether some people, feel like it kind of lets you, some people don't agree with that. I don't know. Different people have different views. But essentially that's what I'm doing here is, two sum ifs just being added together to give me the values of all of the values up until the current period number for the column -1. Then in my closing balance, I'm doing the same thing, but instead of having -1 on the end here, it's just my period number. I probably could have simplified that one by just removing the equal sign and just putting less than. Anyway, that's another job for another day. So that kind of simulates that. And then my two functions here are really just effectively, this one is just linking to my sales number, really simple. And then down here for my receipts, a little bit of messing around here so that we could have different debtor terms in here. So what it does is get a little bit of a complicated formula. I use the ifs function to do a number of kind of nested if functions. So ifs function essentially says, does my, is G6 if it's equal to 0, or is it less than my debtor terms? So by adding these two tests together, this creates an or function which spills. So it's again a little bit of a strange one. If you go true plus a true, you'll still end up with true. If you said true plus a false, you'll still end up with true. But if you said false plus false, so neither of them pass, then you'll end up with a false.
We've got a question from Patrick, which I thought was a joke, because he says, why is it called the let function? And I thought it was like the opening of a joke. And he says, no,
Okay.
it's a genuine question. And
Right.
the reason it's called let is like from programming, you know, so let this equal that. And then, you know, is that your interpretation of it, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably where it comes from. You know, it's not the most intuitive name for a function, I must say, but anyway.
Get your answers. It comes from the functional programming languages. Yeah.
Kind of makes sense. You know, I do quite like sort of splitting it up over multiple lines and makes it a little bit clearer to look at. But yeah, but then you end up, you know, potentially expanding this out to take up half your screen sometimes as well, which is a little bit frustrating. All right, so that's kind of what this effectively is doing. It basically gives me a way of doing a nested ifs in there to say, well, where am I? Am I before my number of my terms, which is entered in months? So if I entered 3 months, I want to know whether I'm before that or not. So in which case I'm going to start picking up my sales from 3 months onwards and so on. Effectively what this is doing. Anyway, so the other method was to take a slightly different approach with this. And to me, you know, when we're doing financial models, the traditional way is if we're in Excel, we need an opening balance, we have additions, we have subtractions, and we have a closing balance. But why do we even need an opening balance? Really, all I need is a closing balance. So if I knew what my opening balance was here, I don't need to have an opening balance calculated for every single month. All I need to do is calculate a closing balance for every single month, because that's what I'm going to link to in my balance sheet. So all I've done there is I've just, in this case, so these are calculating the exact same thing. In this case here, I've dispensed with calculating the opening balance because it's not particularly useful. There's the opening balance for my entire balance sheet, but I don't calculate it each month. In here, what I've got is same formula for my sales, same formula for my receipts, but I'm just calculating a closing balance, this time using the scan function. And again, I really don't like the name of this function. Like it's scan.
The what?
Scan.
Is this another new one of those new?
Yeah, it's pretty new. It basically.
Wow, I can't keep up. I
wish they'd just call it accumulator, because that's what it does. It just accumulates stuff. So you give it an opening balance, initial value, and then you give it an array function, which is also an array of values here. And then you tell it what you want it to do with that array of values. So here I'm saying there's my opening value. There's my array of numbers, which is just these 2 rows above. And what do I want you to do with them? Well, I simply want you to sum the accumulator with all of the values. So the accumulator was my first value here, and then all of my values of the array. So simply add up my opening balance with all of these values, which then also obviously spills across. So again, kind of a weird name for a function. Like, why call it scan? Like, it just seems bizarre to me. But anyway, scan, it is what it is. And it's probably a more elegant way than using the kind of messy stuff I was doing up here with sum ifs. So if you sort of compare that function with, you know, this function, this one's probably a little bit simpler once you kind of get your head around what the scan function is doing, but it's not particularly difficult. I mean, I guess you can use it to do some other things as well if you wanted to write some kind of fancier functions in here. But, you know, in our case, we're just simply adding things up. So it's a very simple sum function. So yeah, so hopefully I'm making sense with that. So yes, if you haven't used some of these functions, obviously it's going to be a little bit new. Grab the model afterwards and have a play. But they are quite useful. So effectively, most of the model I've done using the traditional sort of opening balance, you know, pluses, minuses, and closing balance. So these are all using my sum ifs method. So it was the first one we showed up here. But I think probably if I was going to do this model again, I would just use the scan method. So this accumulated closing balance, because I don't need to calculate this. All right. Any other questions we need to talk about at the moment, Danielle?
Yeah, loads. We've got there's
All
all
right.
sorts of things going on in the chat. I'll send it to
Okay.
you
All right.
because I know we don't have much time left. But
All right.
a
That's
couple
good.
of people say they're a little bit lost and it's quite advanced. And do you have any resources to introduce people to dynamic arrays? Do you have anything you recommend? Any favorite resources?
Um,
And Mira would like to know what the advantage of the dynamic arrays are. Like, why have they done it?
yeah.
Why are you pondering on that?
All right. Resources. I mean, there's so many. Like, if you YouTube dynamic arrays, you'll find like millions of. Everyone's done articles and blogs, and I think we've got some on our YouTube channel, and Danielle, I'm sure you probably have some on yours as well, and probably a number of other people here. If you want to, I mean, in the chat, you can share your favorite dynamic arrays resource if you like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But yeah, there's literally thousands of them out there.
Yeah.
The main advantage, I think, is that they do automatically copy themselves. So it's a little bit, if you're not used to them, it's a little bit different. This example here is my depreciation calculation. So I've done depreciation calc, which spills down and across as well. And then down the bottom here, just another by code to add them all up again. So all these things, I suppose the biggest advantage is that they do copy themselves. So what this allows me to do is come back up the top here. And at the moment, you'll see down, I've got a little summary down the bottom here. And this is also generated with dynamic arrays. So I've got a sequence here generated of all of my years. I've got my sales number, just a sum ifs to give me my sales numbers. COGS, gross profit, they all working the same way. But the cool thing is that this is basically dynamically generated. So if I come back up here and I go up to my inputs and I say, you know what, we need to extend this model out. Instead of 5 years, let's make it a 10-year model. Let's go out to 120 periods. Bang, my model is now calculating 10 years instead of 5 years. And that's all I needed to do.
Yeah, and I think it gets around that traditional errors in models where people accidentally delete cells and things like that, and that's one of the big advantages. And what you're showing here, where it automatically expands, is just absolute gold. It's fantastic.
Yeah, quite right. No, that's another huge advantage as well, Danielle, is that you don't have to worry about someone coming in and fiddling in the middle with your formulas. If someone tries to edit a formula, if I press F2 on that, I get nothing.
I can't. Yeah.
You can't just like, I just want to, I just want to add in another 100,000. No, then you just mess
and
up
people
the whole
love
model.
to do that. They love. There's no reason for you to do that in a financial model.
Yeah, exactly. And so you can see down the bottom here, there's my, my little summary table is now expanded out to 10 years. And we did another test of this where we said, I wonder how many columns you could expand it to. We expanded it out to like 16,000 columns, basically taking up all of Excel's columns. It did take a little while to calculate, though, I must say. But yes, you can, if you want to, make a 1,033-year model, forecasted monthly. Anyway, so that's I think to me that's the biggest advantage of these is the fact that people can't mess with them and the fact that they do automatically copy themselves as well.
Yeah,
there's
I know some of the formulas that you've shown are pretty complex, and they're sort of showing, I think, to its utter limits of what is possible in a financial model. But if you are new to array formulas, just try, firstly, probably the sequence formula and the unique formula. To me, they're probably the two that you'll find the most useful. Just get your head around that. Filter,
and probably sort would be the other one.
And sort, I find filter a little bit difficult to get your head around at first. That's really, I use the filter a lot today. I use dynamic arrays all the time now. But I think probably, the unique, the sequence, and maybe the sort, just to kind of get used to them, just to get started. Yep,
definitely. They're certainly the simplest ones for sure.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we might leave it there. Jeff, unless was there anything else you wanted to add before we end?
No, not really. We'll send, so like we said, we will make the copy of the model available. If you do have questions, I mean, feel free to to shoot those through.
So people can get on LinkedIn, can't they?
Yep, exactly.
Fantastic.
And the key to making this work is this whole thing, this whole period number at the top. If there's a skill error there, the entire model doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Fantastic, Jeff. Thank you so much. That was absolutely mind-blowing. I really enjoyed that, to really show the upper limits of what dynamic arrays can do in the context of a financial model.
Yeah.
So, okay. And the chat is still going. Wow. Okay. I'm going to send out a copy of the chat as well, because there's all sorts of stuff.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks so much, Jeff. And catch up soon. All right.
Thank you for everyone for attending.